I'm joined today by Robert Wahler, the developer of SiNKR and SiNKR2, which is the game we're going to be specifically talking about today. So, Robert, thank you for taking a little bit of time to talk to us about this really great puzzle game that captured my interest.
Yeah, Jacob, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, great! Well, I'm glad I get to pick your brain. I've played the game a little bit, so I've got some specific things I want to ask you about. But before we get going any further, uh, for people that haven't heard about SiNKR or SiNKR2 specifically, why don't you give us a pitch? What is the game? What's it all about? And why should people be interested?
Right. So, SiNKR and SiNKR2, which is what I'm working on now, trying to release, is it's a minimalist puzzle game. I'm a big fan of these puzzle games, especially on Steam. So basically, the pitch is you have this giant fishing tackle and a few contraptions, and your whole job is to get these hockey pucks off the ice and put them in the holes. So but it's not. It's very abstract, I should
Hmm.
say.
I think that's a good word for it. Devilishly challenging would be another word for it. I'm about halfway through the game now in kind of playing it for our review, and it gets tough, but there's some really clever things going on with it. I do want to talk about kind of the minimalism of the game, but I guess the first thing I'd kind of like to ask about is what was your inspiration, not just for SiNKR 2, obviously as a sequel that's kind of building on the first one, but for launching into the world of puzzle games and kind of building these two games.
Oh, well, my original inspiration, like I mentioned before, was fishing. I knew I wanted to make a minimalist order of operations or sequence puzzle game, right? So
Mm.
I kind of like to go to real life things to find things that you can sequence.
Mm.
And fishing, I like to fish. So if you got the fishing reel analogy, you can reel in a hook, but you can't unreel a hook. And that's one of
Mm.
those things where, okay, there's a constraint that comes naturally, people can understand. So what can I build off of that? So really, that's my real life inspiration for SiNKR, pulling in hooks.
That's a interesting draw from it. I can totally see that. As you start playing the game, that's that big restraint of once you commit to pulling something, you really in a lot of cases can't undo it. Um, so you brought up your love for like the minimalist puzzle genre, which is I share a love for that genre. I love these games like SiNKR that don't actually give you any text instructions. One of the things that really, as I'm playing through this game, everything is taught to you through actions and visuals. How do you go about constructing a game like that? I imagine that's going to be a challenge in some ways, is not being kind of committing to that idea of not telling a character what they can and cannot do.
Right. Yeah, it is challenging. And I spend an awful lot of time, happily so, doing what I call a visual learning, which is basically laying things out, like you said, without text and trying to teach the game without being overly nannying. I don't, part of my enjoyment of games is discovery of the
Mm.
mechanics and understanding the world and finding things, exploration. And if you're too nannying, you teach too much, then you never get that sense of aha. So
Mm.
I like to and I guess in regards to not having text, I just prefer that. My inspiration games all have no text, like Clocky or Hook,
Mm.
or there's a game called Line, Line, no text.
Yes.
It's just really well done games that teach their mechanic without overly teaching it, and they don't need any text, which makes it great for globalization and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not something I'd even considered, but that kind of solves that issue of localization if you don't have any
It
text to be translated.
it makes a big difference. The majority of my customers, or at least over 50% of them, don't use English as their primary language, so
Huh.
that's a big deal. At least on Steam, where I have those stats.
Yeah, that's cool. The I always like asking people that make puzzle games how they go about making puzzles, mainly because it's such a like crazy concept to me. I get stuck in these puzzles and I'm like, how did somebody put this together? Like uh, I'm sitting here bamboozled and somebody obviously worked this through and had this all thought out. So what's I always like to ask what's your process? Like
Uh,
how do you approach building puzzles?
That's well, I'll tell you what I do, and I'm sure everybody has a different process, but I like to sit out on my deck in the sun with a beer and piece of paper and a pencil and just think about it, talk about it. My wife is great about indulging me to helping with when I get stuck on things, and she comes up with some great things on her own too when I'm really impressed. But really casual, sit outside. I usually use 3x5 cards because
Hmm.
I can move them around on my desk after I'm back inside and not drinking beer anymore. I'll lay them out on the desk and arrange them. That way I can change order of puzzles. And then, I'll eventually take them into the computer. But at that point, the puzzles kind of morph. When I actually put them in the level editor in Unity, the design iterations change what I actually drew out the first time. So they don't always look like what I drew out on paper. But I think that's a normal kind of process.
Sure. But you start from a very non-digital place.
Oh yes,
That's interesting.
I think that because I work digitally in my day job, I'm a computer programmer,
Hmm.
that I've learned over the years that if you spend too much time in front of the computer becomes the end result, and you spend so much time on the process, you lose sight of what the goal is, or
Hmm.
sort of like the forest for the trees kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think if you strip all that out and just do it on paper, you're more likely to come up with the design you're happy with faster than if you have the computer and thinking about typing things in, thinking about for loops and whatever. No, just draw it out first and then take that into the computer.
That's some
So,
cool insight. Final question specifically about the game that I really kind of wanted to find out your thought process on was why a sequel. So why are you doing this? What you did with SiNKR again, and how are you kind of making things different?
right. So the sequel thing, I've got a lot of feedback on SiNKR1 that people like the mechanics, the contraptions, but I didn't go deep enough on some of them, specifically like hooks, hooking other hooks, things like that. So what I did is for SiNKR2, rather than adding, jumping the shark and adding a bunch of new contraptions, I took the same contraptions and I came up with new themes for them.
Ah, okay.
For like in SiNKR2, there's these whole theme section that's just spirals where you try to figure out how to manage as the hook is going through
Hmm.
spiral like that. And I had this idea of linear and rotational symmetry. So there are a lot of puzzles with, parallel lines or hooks and contraptions and portals that if you rotate them like this, they're just slightly different than they were before. And I guess if the game was a bigger scope, I might have done a DLC for SiNKR1 because this is more like DLC. But in a low scope game that retails for $1.99 or $2.99 for SiNKR2, it's just doesn't DLC doesn't make sense to me.
Sure.
I don't buy DLC for minimalist puzzle games, so there you have it, SiNKR2.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. You brought up something I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on. Um, that I hadn't thought of originally. In that everything in SiNKR2 is very thematic, and as you go through the levels, they kind of are in these blocks. And I wonder, is that something that you start with? Do you start with themes and build levels around themes, or do you build levels and then they end up being in themes together?
It's probably mostly I start with themes because at the beginning of each thematic section, I need to teach a new mechanic,
Hmm,
probably,
makes
right?
sense.
So I have to kind of plan for that. Some of the later themes, I'll bring in mechanics from earlier themes, and some of those kind of get moved around between
Gotcha.
themes at the end. But for the first part of each of the theme section, I have to really carefully plan out how I introduce a new mechanic or a new. It may not be a new mechanic; it may be the same mechanics, but just in a different layout. Like for instance, spirals or some sort of symmetry around the portals being linear and things
Hmm,
like that.
cool.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Moving from talking about kind of your design philosophy of SiNKR and the game, what is your story? What got you involved in the world of game development and making puzzle games?
All right. Well, I've been a video gamer since I guess close to the beginning. I remember there's in college there was this radio station at college was giving away a copy of Zork, the Infocom text adventure
Oh
game.
man, early
So
days.
Yeah, this was early. Excuse me. So and that got me really hooked. I really enjoyed those text adventure games. But it took years and years before I actually started making games. I only started about 6 years ago. And I think finances were the thing that kept me from jumping right into game development a long time ago. What I've been doing instead is contract programming, right? And when I have downtime between contracts, making games is something I can do while waiting for the next contract, and so I don't depend on making games for my income yet. That's good, and I think I was kind of mercenary in my decision to not become a full-time game developer because money and eating and that kind of stuff it's hard. Some people do it. Yeah, eating is good. Some people can do it, and I have the utmost amazement and appreciation for those that can, and I hope to someday be able to do this full time, but not yet.
Well, I think that's good to bring up too, because a lot of times you only hear the big success stories, like, oh, I quit my job and went full time. But I don't, at least in talking to devs, that has not been the case for most developers. I think most developers are much more kind of on your side of things, where it's like a part-time thing. It's part of their income. It's supplemental. It's a passion project that they do alongside other work. So it's always good to have people say, yeah, no, this is a thing that happens.
Yeah, you have to be very passionate about it because there are lots of easier ways to make money. So game development is not an easy way to make money, but I understand the passion. I have it, and I know lots of people that do as well. And I think it's probably a smart choice if you're not funded independently to kind of ease into it if you can.
Makes sense. You mentioned a couple games, like Zork and a couple of those other minimalist puzzle games that were an inspiration to you. Any other games that kind of stick out in your history of playing games that were kind of those linchpin moments that made you say, oh, I want to make these?
Well, my all-time favorite game is Portal 1 and 2, right there, as far as puzzle games go. And I really think, if I ever can do a big AAA game, it will be a game kind of like that because I really enjoy that. But as far as minimalist puzzle games, I play tons of those, and I guess I already mentioned some of my favorites, like Clocky and Hook and Line, Lyne. But I don't know. Do you play on the consoles at all?
I am not a big console player. I tend towards the PC myself, but
yeah, I do too. But I'm actually committed to releasing SiNKR on the Xbox and Switch, right? So I've been trying to reacquaint myself with the Xbox, and what I'm getting at is that I've got my Xbox here, and they have this sale on now. So $1 will get you 3 months of Xbox Game Pass, and so that is a great deal. I don't know if I'll continue it, and maybe I will because they're kind of hooking me on it. But I've just played a game called what was it? Gardens Between.
Oh yeah, we reviewed Gardens Between. Yeah, it's a fantastic game.
It's amazing, and it's one of those sequence games, so it's right up my alley of something I would enjoy. I mean, they spend an incredible amount of time on art. I can tell. I mean, it's really gorgeous. A labor of love. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying that. And I wouldn't have played that if I hadn't spent that $1 on the Xbox because it came out at $20 on Steam, and it just didn't seem like they were billing it as a minimalist game. It's really not. But for $20, I think I was going to wait till it hit the Humble Bundle or something like that. But here I am discovering it on the Game Pass thing for Xbox, and I'm really glad I did. So
I've talked to a few game devs that have had stuff on the Game Pass, and it seems like that's a really good discovery tool for people for finding games they wouldn't normally run into. And that, like you said, that price is kind of hard to beat. Final question that we ask everybody we talk to. What other indie game projects that are out there that have grabbed your attention? Either ones that are in the works, ones that have just come out, that use it as an opportunity to shout out people that you think are making things that are cool.
I'm gonna write this down. I'm going to say there's a bunch of minimalist games that I like to play, but I just played one last week that I completely missed. It came out a year ago. It's called Boxline. That's 2 words, BOX space ALIGN. So it's on Steam, and it just came out on the Switch. It's a very minimalist game, but it's very clever. It's like you have this pile of cubes, and it's you try to match up to 3 to 5 of them. So it sounds like a match three game, but it's in 3 dimensions, and you can
Ooh.
rotate the board. And it starts out really simple, and then it becomes really, oh wow, this is this is melting my brain. So I really like that. And I just found this week, and another one that I've played before that I don't know if you've seen is She Remembered Caterpillars. Have you played
Yeah,
that?
I've seen it. I haven't played the full version of it, but I played a demo a ways back,
Yeah,
and
that's
really cool game too.
yeah, it's clever. The mechanic of using color to kind of morph these creatures, and to get through the sequence is, really well done. I enjoy that game.
Cool, awesome. Well, Robert, thank you for talking to us about
Yeah,
SiNKR
thanks.
and SiNKR2 and your history. May 9th is when SiNKR2 will be coming out on Steam and Itch. So
Right.
we'll have a link down in the description below if people have liked some of the footage in the background and think this sounds interesting. Go check it out, put it on a wish list. Go buy it if you're watching it after. And again, thank you for talking to us about your development history.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, Jacob. Thank you very much.